Hello, Joanna. Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today. I'm very excited to chat with you. To get started, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself and your business for anyone that might not be familiar with you?
Yeah, so my name is Joanna Sapir, and I am a business strategist for yoga teachers and a variety of wellness practitioners. And I got into this work after I started a strength and conditioning gym, a brick and mortar strength and conditioning gym a long time ago now. 2008 is when I started it. And I had been a public school teacher for 10 years previously. I had absolutely no experience in business and didn't know what I was doing. And I think so many of us get into business like that, right? We have this passion for teaching yoga. In my case, it was teaching strength training and helping people get stronger, and yet have no clue on any of like the business side of things. I just totally didn't know what I was doing. In my case, my business actually took off. I started getting clients right away and found myself really busy. I was a single mom of two young kids at the time and was like working split shifts, early in the morning and late at night, and paying pretty much all my income to childcare. And it got crazy. I mean, it just got to be a burden, and I was like, okay, wait, something's wrong here. Like, how do people run businesses? I need to learn how to run a business because this is not it. This is not sustainable. This is not good for my health. And so I decided to really set about like this project of, okay, I'm going to learn how to run a business, not just teach people how to get stronger. And so that's what I did. And eventually, at one point, somebody actually approached me about buying my business. And I was like, oh, okay, that's a possibility here. That's something I can do. And so I decided at that time I wasn't ready to sell my business, but I was like, I think in the long term, that's what I want to do, is like really build this to be something that's really worth something that I can hand off to somebody else. And so at some point, I got to that point where I was like, okay, it's here and I'm ready to do that. And I sold it. And I had already been at that point coaching other people. I had been recruited by a company to be one of their business coaches for other fitness business owners. And I had been doing that. I started kind of on the side coaching other practitioners myself. It was very much a melding of like my teaching background and everything I had learned in business. And I knew that that's what I wanted to do next. So I started this business 7 years ago now, and have been. It's just such a joy. It's what I do. Is I help practitioners systematize and organize their businesses to bring in higher income with less time and effort, so that they can live the lives they want and not be so tied to their businesses.
Generally, they say like an entrepreneur will work for 80 hours just so they don't have to work a 9 to 5 for somebody else. But that's not usually the dream when we start doing it. Is it?
Right.
That's just often what it ends up looking like in that sort of hustle phase. So
And it
yeah.
doesn't have to. Yeah.
How do people really find people that are ready to invest, clients that are ready to invest?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a big mindset shift and framing for yoga teachers, especially, and in just the fields of wellness altogether. The models that are prominent, that probably a lot of people listening have, are just kind of, we're just used to them. And the model is that we sell classes or sessions, right? One-on-one sessions or group classes, or maybe it's a pack of sessions or pack of classes. And if we're looking for really helping people make lifestyle change and have transformation, you can ask any practitioner and you would know, right? As a yoga teacher, like, does a class do that for someone? Does a pack of classes do that for someone? And no, it doesn't. And so really thinking about getting long-term committed clients who really achieve transformation requires that we actually go, oh, what does that take? What would it take for like my favorite clients that I have? What is the process that they need? What is the length of time? What is the journey they need to take? Right. And that becomes so much more than just show up at classes sometimes. And so it starts with us really looking at what is the journey that I want to provide for my clients? And so I just want to like let that sink in for a second, because that's really, really important. If we're selling people, offering people drop-in classes, or again, pack of sessions, even if you're a studio owner and maybe have a month-to-month kind of membership, that still doesn't have, it's still not a container, right? And by container, I mean, it doesn't have an end. It doesn't have a beginning, middle, and end. And so that's kind of a second piece I want to add here, is like thinking of a journey that you might take someone on as, what is the beginning, what is the middle, and what is the end? And the end doesn't have to be an ending forever. It doesn't have to be like many of us think of, well, yoga is for life, right? As teachers, we don't imagine ever stopping. So we don't see an end. And you may not envision that for your students either. So I don't mean that their yoga journey ends, but that container of your services may lead into another, right? So just to be clear about that.
Mm.
And so even in like a membership model that I'm saying, if anybody listening has a membership model, it's like, what can you build into that membership model to create those kind of milestones that make a beginning, middle, and end for somebody, and then a new beginning, middle, and end? Like, what are the markers, right? And it could be as simple as time, like a year at a time. Like, what are you doing to complete somebody's year, right? Energetically, like, what kind of honoring are you doing to celebrate and help somebody complete some cycle? But deeper than just time would be, what have you gained in that time, right? What changes have you experienced? How is your life different now in that time? And again, honoring that in some way before moving into whatever that next phase is. Anyway, all of this is to say that it starts with us really understanding what is it that we're really trying to offer people. And actually, I'm suggesting changing the way you offer your services to be based on providing that real transformation or journey, and thinking of it in terms of, what are the containers that I'm providing people to help that happen?
Yeah, that makes sense. Always having something that they're working towards rather than just an endless ongoing session of
Exactly.
classes. Yeah.
Exactly. And the truth is, and this is no different from, I owned a gym, and now I work with all kinds of practitioners, but the gym is a really good example. It's the same with a yoga studio or a private teacher. That unending, like, this just keeps going. It's actually how you lose people, right?
Mm.
When I, as a student, don't know where I am in my own journey, or remember, like, why did I start doing this, right? We all hope that everybody gets like hooked and finds that same, you know, spiritual bug that we as teachers have, but like, that, you can't just sit and hope for that. You need to actually design that to try to make that happen. And think about, like, what is it that keeps you, like, what are the markers? There are markers and milestones of some sort, that you can think of for your folks. And when that's not there, you will lose people in the long run. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense. Or even if they do get hooked, you might lose them to something where they're like, oh, actually, I really want to work on this specific thing. And they find someone else that's working on that specific thing that has that goal that they can then like
Right.
feel like they're diving deeper rather than just their
Just
continual
going along,
practice.
going along. Exactly. Exactly.
So, how do we gauge whether someone is ready to like invest in their own transformation in this way if we're really trying to seek out people that are ready to make sort of progress, I suppose?
Yeah. And so this all comes down to the sales process. And so, this is like not language that most of us have already. So I'll introduce it, that like, the sales process is, what is your process for, again, in very, very businessy language, converting your leads into clients? Like, what is your process for that? So somebody, finds you on your website, or they're a referral from a current client, whether they call you, text you, email you, contact form on the website, all these different ways. That's a lead that's showing some interest. What is your step-by-step process for converting them into clients? And when we are selling offering classes, drop-in classes. Oh, just try a class. Or maybe it's like one of these, like, the classic, like 30 days for $30 or whatever, like many studios have. That is an attempt at a sales process, but that's where a lot of people kind of go wrong. So if we haven't done that reframe for ourselves in how we think about what we're offering, and even have designed, as I'm saying, that journey, what's that journey for folks? Then our sales process is just come try a session, just come try a class, right? Just try it out. And that by itself is almost encouraging the opposite of commitment long term. That is teaching them, you're going to see if you like it based on just like coming to a class or two or three or whatever it is. And we don't want a sales process that does that. We want to really carefully design a sales process that is meant to reframe for them what they're looking for. What is it they're looking for? And so we don't ask them what they're looking for, which is kind of a classic thing, like, oh yeah, hey, what are you looking for? Instead, we ask questions like, in the sales process, we ask questions like, tell me about your short-term and long-term health and wellness goals, right? And so just that by itself is starting to even to have that long-term, the wording even long-term, what are your long-term health and wellness goals? It immediately is framing the question to the person, not like, what are you looking for in a yoga class? Like, why do you want to come to a yoga class? It's like, where do you want to be going? Right? It's automatically putting them in the frame of mind of a long-term approach. And what is it that they want to be getting from this? What is it that they want to experience or achieve or feel, right? And so your sales process, you want to have pieces like this. And I can break this down, Adrienne. I teach a really particular sales process, and I'm happy to share like all the steps of it. But you want something in that process where you are having a conversation with somebody in order to ask these questions to determine, is this somebody who is a fit for my services, right? And part of that is gauging their commitment level and where they're at. Part of it is also just gauging, like, is this somebody that I can actually help? Just want to be clear about that, right? People may be coming who are looking to solve issues that may be out of your scope or that you don't think yoga even is a fit for. There could be those reasons too. But is this somebody a fit? Is this person a fit? And giving them that framing of looking at it as a long-term process and commitment and journey.
That makes sense, because some people might not know what they want specifically out of like a yoga class at the beginning, because a lot of people, we don't necessarily understand yoga, but you have some kind of goal, and then how can yoga help them get to that ultimate goal if that aligns with what they're working on?
Absolutely. I would assume that the vast majority of people have no idea what they're looking for in a yoga class or a yoga program. And it's exactly, and this is in all services in general, it's exactly why we don't ask them that. They don't know they're coming to you. They're coming to you for help. And they got some idea, this is for folks who are not yogis already. They had some idea that yoga somehow could help them, and they're trying to find that out. Can it help me? And that's part of your job, is to determine, like, can yoga help them, right? And to answer that. So we ask questions about them, not about what they want. We ask questions for us as the ones with the expertise, as the guides, to determine, what does this person actually need? They don't know that. And then of course it does depend on your market, you know about that. And so some folks listening may be very specifically working just with people who are more advanced yoga practitioners. And so, those are different questions you're going to ask them.
Yeah.
It depends, but I would imagine that many people are either getting into yoga for the first time, or have had maybe some not great experiences so far, and still on track, and still like, I think there's just a better fit for me somewhere, and so again, we're asking questions about them, not about what they are looking for in us.
Yeah, and yoga's so vast as well. Most people don't know that it's more than just asana, the postures. So they might only have that perspective of a yoga class. I think that this would resonate a lot with a lot of our listeners, because I know most of us here really are in this to make impact in people's lives. And I can see that this symbol would aim to do that rather than just be like, come to a class and get people like in the door. But it's obviously a little bit more of an involved sales process. Do you need to do this for like even your lowest ticket offers, or is this more those higher ticket, like bigger workshops or retreats or longer term ongoing projects?
Yeah. So to be clear, practitioners that work with me specifically are creating full programs. And so, yes, they would be considered high ticket offerings. And so when somebody decides to work with me, they are deciding to leave behind a session by session or class by class or, punch cards, packs of classes approach and really move into this more impact building piece. That can be done, to be clear, that can be done in a one-on-one setting or a group setting, any and all and in between. And so I help people actually design their programs, and that's very individualized. Like that is based on you as the practitioner and who your ideal clients are and what you believe they need. So people that work with me design all kinds of programs. And in terms of like the pricing, low ticket, high ticket, all that, it really varies. It's really based on them, what their expertise is, who they're helping, what the problems are, and what they believe is the journey that their people need. But yes, I wouldn't see a reason to use the sales process I teach. The sales process I teach is ultimately involves a consultation. And so this is a face-to-face consultation. If you have an in-person practice, it's in person. And if you have an online business, it's online. But it is face-to-face either way. And it's in-depth. It's an in-depth assessment process. And yeah, you wouldn't want to be spending that time if all you're doing is offering a session or a class, right? And so this is a process for taking people really on the full journey. At the same time, I'm sure that some of the things that I have shared and can share will be enlightening to anyone, even if they're not ready to make that step of creating programs.
Once you get into the hang of it, especially if you're brand new and you're like, oh, I just really need people or something to fill my program. And then the thought of saying no to someone might not align because you're like, oh no, I need those 10 people. How can you judge though if someone's really not ready for it? Because that's going to save you time, I imagine, in the long run, if they're really just not ready to commit.
Yeah. Let's see. Why don't I outline the sales process I use so that we can get concrete and kind of know what we're talking about? So I actually have two different pathways, one for people who are brick and mortar and see their clients in person, and then one for online. But I'll just do the in-person one, assuming that most folks listening are offering in-person services, although this absolutely applies to, again, there's a process for online. So in person, and let's say you have a studio or a one-on-one business or whatever it is, and you have a website. I would hope so if you're listening to this podcast, right? And so people are coming through your website, or you have a business phone line or whatever, however you capture these leads. And so people reach out. I mean, what I recommend is that on your website that you have that your call to action is something like schedule a 15-minute phone consultation. And that's free, a free 15-minute phone consultation. Those don't have to be the words, but that's essentially what it is. And that there be no other call to action. That's what there is. There isn't schedule a drop-in class. There isn't anything but schedule the 15-minute phone consultation, right? That's the thing that people can do. And so they schedule that. And that is our pre-qualification process. And so that is a brief phone call where you do a mini interview, which is a filtering process. And so this is where you are weeding out the most obvious non-fits. And so you were talking, Adrienne, about, folks that are brand new. When you're brand new, I do believe that when you're truly brand new, you do actually need to take everybody, because you need to experience like the bad fits. You need to experience that for yourself to know who's not a fit for you. Who are the people that are a problem for you? Like you've got to You got to learn that the hard way. But it doesn't take long to kind of recognize, like anybody who's listening, who's worked with, let's just say 20 people, that's even enough of a sample size, I think, 20 people for you to kind of comb through those 20 or more or 100 or whatever hundreds you have worked with, and look at who have been like the most amazing people to work with that I've loved working with and have just seen so much progress and have grown and seen transformation. Like those are the two, putting those together in a Venn diagram, right? I loved them. I loved working with them. Great energy. And they really benefited. They really saw experience transformation. They are doing it. And what are the qualities of those people? And what's interesting about this is it might point to a niche and it may not. And so by niche, it's like, some specialty or some demographic, commonality, but it may not. It may be just as simple as like a certain personality type with certain problems. Like it doesn't have to be all nicheified, businessified, you know what I mean? For you to kind of go, look at the people I've loved working with, here's what they have in common, and then you do the same for the people who haven't been great, the ones who vibes were off, they were just a total pain in the ass. Again, the longer you've been in business, the more you've experienced that, right? Like you know who those folks are. Or, just struggled, like you just weren't able to help them. I mean, there are going to be people who really do have like physical, emotional, etc. issues that are beyond your skills and abilities, right? And so it's important too to identify those kind of no folks. And I just gave an exercise that anybody can do, and you can use that for your initial screening of anyone, right? And just simply talking to them and asking them questions to start to see, again, you start with, tell me about your short-term and long-term goals. Where are you now? What have you tried already? Have you ever, done yoga before? What was it like for you? This is that, some really simple stuff. And to be clear, that 15-minute phone consultation is not, where you enroll somebody. They are not saying yes to your services. You are simply screening them in order to determine whether to invite them in for the in-person assessment. And so again, this is like the sales process that I teach. So that initial screening is a pre-qualification. If you're like, yeah, this is a yes for me so far, you invite them in for this in-person assessment. And that is really the consultation. And so that's where you do like an in-depth interview of them and really understand what are their goals, where do they want to be, where are they now? And you as the practitioner are looking at, okay, what would be my plan to get them there? What would be my process that I would lead them through to get them to where they want to be? And if that's something that you can provide for them, then there is your offer, and ideally that's the program you designed or the programs you've designed or the membership that you've designed. Like ideally, that's exactly what your services do provide. And so you're laying out for them this plan. Here's how we can get you there. And to be really clear, this is not about like promising results that you can't provide. Like this is all very transparent. And, if for example, somebody has some kind of goals that are going to take them, a few years to get to, let's say, you're saying so, and you're not saying like work with me for the next 3 years, but you're laying out for them, like, here's how it would look to work with me. And here's where we'd get to after 6 months. And here's where we could probably get to after a year. And then it might take a couple more years, blah, blah, blah. Like, again, whatever your containers are. So you do have to have your programs designed. I'm not suggesting, unless anyone listening is really a one-on-one higher priced practitioner, which very well may be people listening. And if you want to be offering like totally bespoke programs to every single person, you can do that. I'm generally teaching people how to systematize and organize their businesses to be more streamlined. And in that case, we want the container to essentially be the same-ish for everyone, but it can be customized within it, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
So otherwise you're just creating something brand new every single time as well for yourself.
And that's a ton of work. Yeah. It's exactly why we want to really hone in on who our ideal clients are. And then again, create that container Yes, things can be customized in the middle of it, especially if we're kind of one-on-one or small group, right? But really, at least that provides a bunch of streamlining just right there, even having kind of the same length, and the same basic process.
Mm. I like that you said sometimes it's just a vibe as well. You just like learn that.
You definitely do. Yeah, you definitely do. How people will respond to questions. I mean, yeah, for sure. Even in the pre-qualifying phone call, for sure.
Mm.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, you get that. I think in any business, most of my clients will be in like web design and VA and stuff. And there's some people that you just know straight up that you're like, this is going to be a headache.
Yeah.
And
And so because you asked the question earlier about like the fear over like turning people away, there are two things I just want to add about that. One is that if you let yourself take on people that you can feel that it's off, like just know that's what it's going to be the whole client relationship with them. That's what it's going to be the whole time. It'll only get worse,
yeah,
right? So like that's on you if you decide, to let them in. And then the second thing is people are like, how do I say no? We're so scared of saying no to people in our culture for whatever reason. I'm not, but you can do this so kindly. My goodness, you say, I don't actually think I'm the best person to help you, which is the truth. That is the truth. I'm not the best person to help you. And hopefully you as a practitioner have connections. This is like what networking is great for. And hopefully you know some people that might be really happy with this person, right? And the thing is, it's up to them too. It's not like you're going to facilitate that whole process, but you can absolutely say, I have a couple people to recommend that you reach out to see if they'd be the right ones to help you, right?
yeah,
And you
people
give them those
appreciate that.
exactly. I know, I
Mm.
appreciate it. It's happened to me before.
Mm.
I mean, right? When somebody's like, I don't think I'm the best person to help you, but I know a couple people who may be great. I'm like, thank you. Great. I'm going to reach out to them. It's also just so honorable that like you're acknowledging that you don't think you're the best person to help me. Like I trust you more now,
Yeah, that was the basis of one of my solo episodes a few back, where I did reach out to someone for it was fitness, and they couldn't help me based on timeline, not because of their program or anything, but the timing wasn't going to work. And I asked like, "Oh, do you know anyone else that does like anything similar?" And they just came back and were like, "No, sorry, I'm the only one that does what I do. Good luck." And I was like, I'm pretty sure there are other mother and child exercise classes in the city. And I took it back. It was like, I found it really confronting, I guess, and I didn't appreciate it at all. And I was like, surely you know the other people in your industry. This is a small town, and I won't probably ever go back to her again. So it is really helpful.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely. Like I said, it's honorable, it builds goodwill, it gives referrals to others, and it's serving that person better. So that's all a way to like, we think like, oh, we're saying no. And we're, how do we, that's so awful. It's not at all. It's very kind and honorable and helps everyone. So it's a really good reason to kind of have your referral deck there. Like who are all the different folks who serve different areas, it doesn't have to be somebody doing the exact same thing as you. Again, we're basing it on their goals, right? It doesn't have to even be your modality. Like it doesn't have to be another yoga teacher. It's somebody that can help this person with their goals. And that might be, acupuncture or body work, and it might be soft tissue work instead,
Yeah, that's a good point. And it helps build our network. So we're not as lonely as business owners because we have these other business owners that we're friends with. So they were like, yes, I can help this person. And how do we kind of prime them? How do we get them excited about this transformation process rather than maybe they were thinking, I'll just go to a yoga class every week. And then you're like, actually, we've got this whole program.
Yeah. So in that pre-qual step, in that pre-qual phone call, part of the pre-qualification process, so I mentioned the part about where you're determining, can I help this person? Once you've determined for you, like, yeah, this looks like one of my people, then you're pre-qualifying them. And so one of the things you're doing is actually sharing, can I, you ask permission. It's all consent based. You can say something like, okay, great. Thanks for telling me all that. I think that I could probably help you. Is it okay if I tell you a little bit about how I work with my clients and students, right? So you ask their permission, and yes. And then that's where you actually lay out if you have programs, or, some of my clients call them treatment plans, depends on the modality, but programs or treatment plans, this is where you actually lay out, and you're saying it very generally, because you're not asking them they're not making any decision here, but you're just saying it generally. You're like, all of my clients begin, or students begin, with an in-person assessment where we do XYZ. And I lay out a plan for you, and I lay out a program. If you want to work with me to do that program, you can ask me any questions to make that decision. You make that decision there. And all of my programs, you can just say, again, very generally speaking, my programs are a minimum of 6 months long. We meet twice a week, and you ask some qualifying questions as you're sharing that. So for example, something like the time commitment piece, I just threw out one where I said twice a week. So you shared that, and then you might just ask them right then, if you decided that you wanted to work with me, are you able to come into my studio twice a week, for 6 months? That's just a yes or no question. And that's like a time commitment thing. Like, do you have that commitment, right? And this is not like trying to get them to say yes. It's just a real question, yes or no. And if they say no, that doesn't qualify, right? It means this person does not, they don't even have to give a reason for it. That's all you're asking is yes or no. And they can say no, right? They say yes, we say, okay, great. And then you say the pricing as well. And again, they're not making a decision here. You're just saying it like in the future, like if you come in for an assessment, and if you decide to work with me, this is how much my programs cost. They start at this price, or they range from this to this, depending on, the length, depending on what's, the length of program that's right for you, etc. Is that in your budget? Yes or no? Really, really simple. These are these two key qualifying pieces. Like, one of them is that time commitment. One of them is the money thing. There might be other factors that you come up with, but those are two really common ones. And so once they do kind of qualify through that process, you say, great, well then I'd like to invite you in for, you're this one-on-one assessment session. My people have all different names. They come up with all different names for them. One of my favorites is one of my clients has what she calls a body map session, because she really does this whole like gait assessment, posture assessment piece, and it's really cool. And so you invite them in for that. And so now they actually are coming in knowing, they already know your pricing. They already know that this is a long-term program. They've already gotten that, right? They've said yes to all those things, like, yes, I can do that. Yes, that's in my budget, etc. So you schedule that, and then we have in my sales system, from then on, we have an automated, what we call the prime and prep sequence. And so this is 3 automated emails that go out between that time you hang up the phone and the appointment where they're coming in and seeing you in person. And so that's just more like priming and prepping them to like of what a program means, what what happens in that, etc. And so I'll just briefly say, like, the first email we send is actually about you. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but especially when people are newer, they will often, and not so well known by a lead or prospect, the people will ask the practitioner, like, so how did you get into this? How long have you been doing this? Basically, like, what's your authority to be doing this? Do you know what I mean? Like, they're looking for that authority. And so our first email is like a business origin story that establishes your authority and kind of explains how you got into this work, how long you've been doing it, etc. But it's a kind of a meaningful story. And it invites them to reply back with their own story, which is actually really, really amazing. I have this in my own sales process as well. And I mean, people write like really, really deep stuff back. So it already starts creating, it's like you're building a relationship with them already, and you haven't even gotten together in person, right? All you had was the phone call, and now like something's going on email. It's pretty cool. And then the second and third emails, there can be a number of things you do. But for example, providing case studies of transformations that your other clients have had before. That's again, like, social proof, testimonial kind of stuff. And I talk about, I'm sure because you do web design and do this, I'm sure that you teach this as well. But, we want to stay away from what I call praise the practitioner testimonials, the ones where it's like, Adrienne is just so great. She's so nice. And, and it's all about you, the practitioner. It's like, no, we want them to tell their stories. We want to collect client stories, not testimonials that praise you, but their stories of before and after. And so you can, ask questions to get that. And so when a lead is going to be coming in for that in-person assessment, right? And they're reading this, they're looking for themselves in those stories, right? They're looking for, like, she's like me and this is what she experienced. That's what we want, is stories like that, right? And then you can also add any kind of, like, what are their key principles? I mean, I imagine this is really the case. All of us have key beliefs, values, principles that we teach that maybe other people don't, right? That are different to us. A good way to think about this is like, there's a lot to complain about in the yoga industry. There is, like, it's really like, it's become very commercialized, right? Like a lot of stuff. So kind of thinking of yourself is like, what's my big issue with, like, what I see happening in yoga? And that's something to talk about here. That is, what do I believe that's different? So it's not about like ranting and putting down anybody else. It's more like, what do I really want somebody to know that they may not know because of everything that's happening in the industry that's different? What's disruptive here that I really want to make sure that they know about me and working with me, and like something I believe about this. So those are all pieces that can go into that series of emails that get somebody ready for coming in. And of course, to be really clear, you want them to know what's going to happen. I mean, I have an email that's just like, here's what we're going to do in our consultation. 1, 2, 3. Like, that's a safety, trauma-informed kind of piece, right? Like, this is how it's going to go, including saying things like, there's no high pressure sales tactics, right? Like, I will present like program options for you. You can say no, you can say yes, you can ask me anything you want to. Like, this is, yes, I will be asking you to make a decision, but it's entirely yours, et cetera, et cetera. So, so we call that the prime and prep campaign.
I have a couple questions around that. So my first one was, can we start, whether you're teaching online or in person, part of this priming? Do we want to be doing that in our content that we're producing? Is there any type of content that sort of works better, like blog posts or webinars or workshops or just our reels or anything like that, to sort of help build that trust and build some of that process before you get them onto that 15-minute call, or to encourage them to jump into that 15-minute call? Is there anything that specifically
I
works
think
well?
there's two questions in there. So there's like, what content, and then what platforms, or like how to present that content. So let me just answer the second one first about like reels, webinars, da da da. Personally, I don't know about you, but personally, like, I just don't believe in a one size fits all approach to this. I really think it depends on you, your market, what lights you up. I mean, I was on a coaching call today with a client, and she's like, I hate Facebook. I just hate Facebook. And I'm like, okay, don't use Facebook then. Like, you don't have to use Facebook. Like, totally don't have to. And so I really believe it's like, where you got to look at where your clients are, and you got to look at like what's easy. And I just happen to be somebody, me personally, I happen to be somebody that, like, Instagram is just like not my place. Like, it's just not for me. And I understand that it's a tool that could be great. It's just not, it doesn't flow for me. I don't even spend time personally there. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just not my place. So why would I build that into my marketing strategy? I don't. So just to be clear, like, and many of my clients are like me. Maybe it's because I'm a former teacher. I attract a lot of former teachers and people who naturally kind of love teaching, and and like to be kind of in front of a group and so on. And so obviously, like, if that's what you love, you're going to be doing teaching as part of your marketing. And so workshops and webinars are going to be fantastic for you. And if you are scared to death of public speaking, then it's not going to be for you, So that's what I believe when it comes to the platforms. As far as the content, yes, absolutely. There is key content, but it's different than that content we're talking about with the prime and prep campaign, because that's a different stage in what, marketers would call the buyer's journey, right? So that prime and prep campaign, somebody has already decided, I'm interested in working with you. They have already reached out to you. They have already talked to you. They have already said, yes, yes, that's in my budget. Yes, yes, I'm interested in this. Yes, yes, I want to proceed and go to the next step, right? They are. And so that content in the prime and prep campaign is just getting them, giving them information and getting them ready to step forward in their journey. The marketing content that's a different stage of awareness for them, right? And so I'm sure that you talk about this and teach this, but we want to look at somebody in an earlier phase of the quote unquote buyer's journey, and even earlier stage of awareness in terms of what they need. And so my favorite content for this stuff is, belief shifting content. What are the ideas that people have about how to reach their specific health and wellness goals that are not right? Where have they gone wrong? Right? What are the things that they're misunderstanding? What are the things that they're being told by the wider industry that are just not true to you or misleading in some way? And it's shifting their beliefs towards what's possible for them and what they actually need. That's the kind of content that is going to get people, that is going to get, pull people closer into you and attract people to you. And then you offer invitations is what I call in my framework. Offering invitations is, an invitation can be to something like a free workshop, or it can simply be to that 15-minute phone consultation, right? And that invitation is for them to talk about them. It's not to buy something, it's to talk about your XYZ, right? Like your goals. So yeah, the belief shifting content, and you get that by looking at where are people making mistakes. A lot of practitioners that work with me, for example, not all, but a lot of them will say, oh, my ideal clients they've gone to medical doctors, they've done this, they've done this, they've done this. That's the kind of content you want to be speaking to. Like, right? You had this issue and you went to your doctor and this is what your doctor said, and it went nowhere, right? Or they just gave you these pills and that's not what you want. And like explaining like why that's happening and what the alternatives are for them. And just to juxtapose that, Adrian, with what a lot of us do that isn't very effective, is we do like tips and tricks kind of content, right? We're like teaching people like a pose. And it's not that you can't ever have that, but that's like, I would just call that like goodwill content. Do you know what I mean? That's just kind of like, again, showing your authority, showing your style a bit, but that's not going to get somebody to want to work with you. There's no reason to want to work with you if all you're doing is giving like the tips and tricks and teaching, because then you're just going to build followers that's what they're on your email list or social account for, is to get those tips and tricks, not to actually like proceed with the possibility of transformation for them, right? And so the belief shifting content is different than that, and that's what we want to focus on.
Yeah, that's interesting. The other thing I wanted to ask that you sort of touched on before is, how do we really explain this transformation? So you mentioned we've got testimonials, but it can get quite difficult in health and wellness because it can get quite fluffy, oh, you're going to like have more energy or you're going to be able to do this, but people really need to be able to ground it down a little bit, I guess, and be more relatable with it with practical things.
Yeah.
What's your advice around that, how to explain these life transformations?
Yeah. Such a good question. I'll answer with two parts. One is that part of my framework, I say speak their language. And so it's actually, to me, very, very easy. And it is, you literally record the words, the direct quotes of your ideal clients in their consultations with you. So both in that pre-qualifying phone call and in the actual in-person assessment, you record direct quotes when you're asking them, what are your goals? When you're asking them, what's wrong right now? What are the issues you're having? You're getting their words, and you literally, like you write copy, Adrian, you're just literally taking that and that becomes your copy. So talk about like concrete, real. You don't have to like be thinking of like, what do people say, or what do they want to say, or what do they want to hear or need to hear? You just speak their language. You just repeat back what these folks have said. And it's also important that you're recording that language only when they've come to you asking for help. This isn't just like out in the ether, random folks. This is the ones who are taking action. So that's pretty important too. So that becomes very, very concrete language because people are speaking just really about like, well, my shoulders are messed up or whatever it is, right? Or I feel stiff all the time, or I feel like an old lady, or whatever their language is. Like that is your language. There's not a right or wrong. It's right because it's theirs. And so we pull that. But the second piece that I wanted to say is that, if you've had clients long term who have really experienced real transformation, the language they use afterwards, like they've been working with you for a year, longer, the language they use is often not going to resonate with people who are early in the journey. And so that is like, we need to balance that because many people just simply don't even know what's really possible. So when they hear the kind of highfalutin, big transformational language, it may not land or resonate. They're just like, I just feel, I just feel sluggish every day and I just don't feel like right in my body. They're not like, I have whatever it might be, like I'm spiritually connected every morning when I do my practice, like they're not thinking that. They're not thinking I want spiritual connection or whatever. I'm just making this up. So we sprinkle in that really, really like long-term transformational stuff very carefully. And, and keep it to the kind of like right now, what are the right now struggles that people have and addressing those. And absolutely in our conversations with them can explain more of what's possible in the long run. But bringing this all back to like, just repeat the words that your clients are saying to you about what they're experiencing and what they want when they first come to you.
Yeah, that's a good tip. And it makes sense that you don't necessarily want to go the big grand ideas anyway, because if someone's sitting there and they're like, my shoulder really hurts, I'm in pain or whatever it is, then they can't necessarily imagine a world without that specific pain where they're feeling amazing everywhere. They can maybe imagine a world where their shoulder stops hurting.
Exactly.
And that's the number one goal for them. And they're like, the rest is too much for me to deal with at the moment because I want to deal with this, whatever the problem they're facing is.
That's exactly right. And just to say, we do want them both. We just want to be like really focused on where people are at right now because we could lose them. Like I said, we sprinkle it in there, but we introduce it carefully, Yeah,
no, that makes sense. A lot of these things are like quite big concepts, especially when we're talking in yoga, and it gets quite deep in the philosophy.
Yes.
That's a lot to take in one go as well. So you want to just introduce it in bits and pieces.
Definitely.
Because we're talking a little bit more high ticket programs here, that can be quite intimidating for people to actually ask for what they're worth and presenting the offer with the actual monetary value. Have you got any tips for people when they're actually taking that step?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. It's. I feel like all my answers are. I'm like, yeah, there's two parts to that. So here's another one with two parts to it. One is that your pricing is not about you. It's about sustaining your business. Beware overly identifying with your business. I mean, I've heard people say like, you're selling yourself when you sell your services, and I wholeheartedly disagree. I understand that perspective, but I have only seen the many, many practitioners I've worked with become more empowered when they recognize that their business is an entity that is not them. Business is what you are, you as the leader of your business. That's what you are, as the leader of the business. And somebody else could be the leader of your business. It doesn't have to be you. It can still be, you can still own it. And I mean, look at, Silicon Valley startups, like the founder starts out leading it and then they eventually hire a CEO, just to kind of note that, like, it's not you, it's its own entity. And you as the leader, your job is to make sure that it's sustainable and profitable. And your pricing is a really, really key piece of that part of sustainability and profitability. And so it's not about you. It's about what does the business need to sustain itself and to be profitable. And of course, your pay is part of the business expenses. but it's not you. The business is not you. So I just want to note that, like, your pricing is not about you. It's about supporting the business. And so that's important. Second thing, I guess this is actually going to have three things. The second thing is other people's wallets and like how much money they have, how they choose to spend their money is like none of your business. That is not your jurisdiction or prerogative. Like, your job is to offer people what you believe they need as the guide and expert that you are. And that's it. It's their choice whether they want to spend that money or not. And it just has nothing to do with you. Their wallet and decisions are not yours. So don't like overly identify with people or think that you have any business in their wallet. And just to be really clear about that, like, I know it's very common for folks to be like, oh, but, I don't think they can afford it, so I'm going to discount my services or something. That's being in their wallet. Like, that's not yours. That's not yours. Like, put a line there. That is not yours. It's if they, in their minds can't afford it, like, I don't get me started on the term can't afford. It doesn't really mean anything. Like, how we spend our money is just about our values. Like, that's not, that's not a real thing. So it's just not ours. That anybody gets to spend their money how they want to. And that's that. We're just offering that. So that's the second thing. The third thing is when I'm working with folks, and so the vast majority of practitioners that work with me are coming on a session by session model. So they may have been selling a class or a session. Well, like yoga teachers that I have, we're selling yoga classes for $15 a class, right? And now they're moving into selling programs that are like $3,000, or more. And so, yes, it's a huge shift. And so just want to say it's very normal to go like, whoa. And we just practice it. We practice saying it out loud. We practice like feeling like, what does $3,000 feel like in the body? Like, how can we expand into, feeling that $3,000? And also, just to be clear, that pricing, we don't make that up out of thin air. That's all based on, we're looking at the program they designed, right? And we're really like understanding its value and so on, and looking at what the business needs to sustain itself. So this is not inflated, made up, like I'm actually just selling a bunch of sessions for $3,000 at all. Like, there's a whole thing in there. And so we're really just expanding that and feeling the possibility of what any client that opts in for this, like, is going to experience. And it's definitely, worth that. And so, we practice it. We practice just saying it out loud. Like, I'll ask them like, oh, this sounds amazing. So how much does it cost? And they just say $3,000. Period. That's it. And we just practice doing that. So yeah, I know it's a shift for folks, but I don't know. Hopefully some of my ranting beforehand helped a little bit.
I think that was really useful. And I like making sure that you take yourself out of it and it's your business and you're just in the business. I had some people might have resonated, but for me it was terrible marketing advice. It was for website design. And they were like, oh, you just need to like go on Instagram and make people love you. And then that's all of it. And I was like, just got to make people love me?
Jeez.
It's the most terrifying thing you can do to me.
Right.
Dude, I've got to unpack before I can manage to just go online and do that. But for someone that was maybe like very outgoing, and maybe that's perfect. I'm not sure, but yeah, sort of separating yourself from the actual business and the services and the transformation, I think, is very useful.
Yes. Like the opposite of that advice you got. Yeah.
Awesome. All right, we've come around to rapid fire question time. So one thing I wanted to ask was, how do you see sort of the landscape of these fitness programs or yoga changing in the next 5 to 10 years in the business respect?
Yeah. I think that I'll be as rapid fire as I can. I mean, we see the pendulum swings, right? And so, for a bit, there's really like boutique yoga, boutique fitness, very small studios, high price, very individualized services. Then like, COVID came around and really the whole world went online. And then we, even before COVID, the rise of influencers, definitely like the Instagram influencers. basically monetizing their audiences with these products, right? And so you see like yoga teachers and other practitioners trying to sell productized. They're not even services, just trying to sell this, you know what I mean? Like, here's this class or this workshop or whatever, or these kind of pre-recorded things that were the opposite of any sort of individualization and customization. And I think that like the middle ground is what's important here, is that I think that especially post-COVID, a lot of people are really, really sick of online. And at the same time, online, obviously, I mean, my business has been fully online since 2017, like pre-COVID. There's obviously like great benefits to it for all, including not having to, for a yoga teacher, not having to pay the overhead of rent and so on, but for the student, not having to transport themselves, right? And the time and all that, right? But we really do want a middle ground where people are getting individualized service in a way that really, really suits them, right? And so I think, I mean, what was your exact question was, what should yoga teachers be keeping an eye on? Is what I would say is not following trends. That's what I would say most of all, is not following the trends. That's where we see these pendulum swings and everybody moving to this and everybody moving to that. And to really think about, I mean, people come to me and ask, should I be going online? And I say, well, do you like serving people online? So like, you need to love what you're doing and it needs to serve your clients well. And whatever that combination is going to be unique to you. It could be a combination of in-person and online. It could be all online. It could be one-on-one online. All of those things, like there's so many options, but you have to love doing it and it needs to serve your clients. And that's what I think people should be looking at rather than like what everybody else is doing.
Yeah. So we don't have to go on Instagram if we don't want to.
Right. That's right.
I've been avoiding it for years. I'm there, but I'm not really there. Awesome. And if you could turn to yourself in your first year of becoming a business owner and an entrepreneur, what advice would you give?
Yeah, I would say don't think of anything as a failure. Like, it's all learning. And stop thinking like it has to look the way somebody else's business did or it's supposed to look a certain way. Try whatever you want to try. Try what lights you up. See how it goes, learn from it, and then keep going, right? You learn even from things that don't go the way you want them to. You learn more from things that didn't go the way you want them to. And things that did go the way you want them to, you learn from those and put it all together and just keep learning from what you're doing, from the things that go well, from the things that don't go well, and just keep going. Like that's so important. I mean, in making it in business, period.
I love that. I personally believe that nothing's a failure unless you didn't learn something from it or you chose not to learn something from it. That's the only way you're really failing, per se, at something. Thank you. And for anyone that wants to connect more and learn more, I believe you have a gift as well for our listeners. How can we find you if it's not on the
Yeah,
web?
we do. Yeah. The gift we have is 3 powerful systems that will transform your yoga business. And so that's like our lead generation system. It lays out the red velvet rope, which is part of what I talked about in the pre-qualification. And you can find that at joannasapir.com/allmats. I'm sure that you'll have the link, but just in case, Joanna is the way it sounds, and my last name is Sapir. joannasapir.com/allmats. And then I also have a podcast, Adrienne, just like you do. And it's called The Business Revolution for Practitioners with Joanna Sapir. So if you plug my name into a podcast player, you should be able to find it.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And I will have all of the links in the show notes, and definitely go check out all of the offers and Joanna's podcast. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing all of this today. It's been so valuable and really interesting. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it too.
Thank you.